Thank you. So David, how are you doing practically? How are you doing this whole situation? How are you holding up?
Baruch Hashem, there are some opportunities here, and I think that's a very good thing to try to mine in a situation like this. And when I speak to people, I try and encourage them to recognize that, within the midst of a lot of challenges, a lot of tragedy, a lot of trauma, there are opportunities. And if we're able to focus on those, I think we're going to come through this changed, hopefully in a better way, even though it's very, very challenging for a good number of people.
Yeah. I mean, you see today, you just start watching the news and anxiety goes up 100%. I mean, you see, convention centers becoming hospitals, and even if a person's meditating and he's praying and he's doing all he can, those visuals are still there. And it's something that's that these visuals stay with you. And I think there's going to be, unfortunately, a lot of post-traumatic stress out of this, unfortunately, out of this thing.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree, which is why one of the things I encourage people to do is to go on a little bit of a media fast. You don't need to know about the latest number, the latest statistics, the latest this. If something really important happens, the Amish will tell us that, there's a cure, or there's something that we can do. But to constantly be bombarded, it's just lodged in the brain in real time. And it is traumatic, particularly people who are sensitive, more sensitized to this. And it's important not to inundate yourself with these images.
Right. There was a study that showed that more people had post-traumatic stress after watching the Boston bombing than actually being there. So right. Just the visualization, it's unbelievable,
Yeah. How many times do people watch the planes fly into the Twin Towers? Time after time after time after time. And it's going to wear on your central nervous system.
Right. So David, I want to talk to you about how many books have you written, David? I think I personally own about 10 of them.
I think 12, 13. Yeah.
12 books. So what I wanted to do is, my whole point of this class today was basically to get people to start reading. Because there's so much stuff you can be watching. And I said, let's start building dot. I mean, the whole Torah, I would say 90% of my classes are based on, building dot. And the more dot we have, the more perspective we have, the less we suffer. And that's something that I wanted just to talk about. Some of the books that, one of my favorite, David, is this book that I want to share to everybody, which is called, you guys can see my notes on it, Free Will Works. And if you see the notes on Free Will Works, I've probably done 35 classes just on this book. And you did such an amazing combination. One of the things, I'm interested in writing a book, but one of the things that I can't get is, who am I selling it to? I want to get the 90% of the crowd that's not affiliated. I want to get the crowd, the religious crowd also. But just to get the combination of both, really, it's so hard. And somehow you really did that in that book, David. Explain to us a little bit about that book, Free Will Works.
Thanks. You're so sweet. Thanks, Gedale. So how Free Will Works was actually about 10 years in the making. I had written the books while I was working on that. In the last couple of years, I worked pretty much exclusively on that. It's a big book, as you know, about 400 pages in the self-cover, 1,000 footnotes. And what I wanted to do was to lay the groundwork for free will, for Bechira, exactly to understand how it is that the quality of our choices directly impact on the quality of our lives. And at the end of the day, to leave the reader with the immutable impression and understanding that the quality of our lives comes down to the quality of our choices. And if we accept responsibility for who we are and what we can become, nothing can stop us. If we don't, nothing will move us. And those 400 pages walk through the logic from a psychological perspective, from a Torah perspective, from an emotional, cognitive, science, physiological, psychological, a multitude of disciplines, all built certainly in the framework of Torah, to best understand how it is we can not only make good choices, but how it bears a direct correlation to the quality of our own emotional, spiritual, and physical health.
Beautiful. One of the lines that you use all the time is when you do good, you feel good. This is like one of the things I like about your books. The books have a lot of strategy, and these classes, obviously the classes that I've been able to gather, it's all about what's next. because it's so easy to get into why me mode. It's so easy to get into that why me mode, which has, we're trying to, when a person's in why me mode, all day long, he's thinking about himself. He's not able to become the best version of him. He's definitely not going to take responsibility. So the books really get you into what's next. And this is what I really love about the books. Practical strategies on what to do next when you're in a situation. Whether it's shalom bayit issues, whether it's dealing. One of the books that you had is how to deal with impossible people, like how to deal with. It's all strategies, and I think that's really the key, because so many people get lost in books sometimes when they don't have enough tachlis, But these books have it's all tachlis. It's all get to the point. This is what I love so much about it.
I so appreciate that. And as you know, I have 100 plus lectures on Torah anytime. But for as good a job as I try and do to explain my own books, I think you do an incredible job of taking it to a whole new level with practical examples that crystallize it in a way that I, quite frankly, humbly have not been able to do myself, whether it's with the books or on the Torah Anytime lectures. So a big yashachar to you for
thank you, David.
Really, the material is only as good as the delivery system. You can have the best medication in the world, as you well know, but if you don't have the means to get into the body, it's inert, it's useless. You have that delivery system. So
Thank you, David. Thank you, David. And one of the things that self-esteem. I use this all the time in recovery. People are dealing with issues today. Self-esteem. I think self-esteem is, and you speak throughout these books on self-esteem.
Yeah.
And one of the lines that you put in there that I think I've used 1,000 times: if you don't love yourself, you're going to lose yourself. And that little line is, I can basically sum up years and years of therapy on why is one person putting more of an effort than another person in his life. How come this guy is waking up at 5 o'clock in the morning to pray? How come this guy is putting in the extra 30 minutes on the workout? How come this guy is doing extra? It's because it comes down to self-esteem. And the way you put that, really, if you don't love yourself, you're going to lose yourself. There's nothing really much to say than that.
Yeah, that's a beautiful point. And the reason why it's so important to understand that is because the intellectual awareness is one thing, but we can do something about it. And the way I explain it is that, if you had somebody who you knew that you didn't like very much, you would ignore him, you wouldn't treat him well. And if you really got on your nerves, you would just do anything you can to get rid of him. Here's have a drink, do this, get away. So when a part of us is upset with us, we engage in those self-destructive behaviors and habits, which ultimately, as you know better than anyone, leads to addiction. So the ability to regain that sense of self and to want to invest in who we are is what is pivotal in moving our lives forward.
Right. And another thing you wrote in a lot of your books, I think there's another great book called I think Real Power. Real Power is another one, which speaks a lot about similar concepts, but basically putting what's determining your the way people determine their failures. People say either the good thing that I saw in your books is, okay, there's 4 things you could do with pain. Either give it meaning right away, numb it, suppress it, or vent it. But just the whole point of give it meaning. I think you speak a lot about in this book, because right away when something happens to a person, right away he's got to give it meaning right away. Otherwise, it's going to linger in his head for years.
That's right. The objective is to frame something as meaningful as possible, but to take a step back and look at the broader psychology, and that's that. When you're in the moment and your sort of ego is engaged, you lose perspective. And when you don't have perspective, you don't have context. You don't have context. You don't have meaning. So ultimately, being able to frame something with meaning requires context, and that requires perspective. As we know, in order to enter that crisis or that situation with the widest degree of perspective as possible, you have to take the ego or the false I out of it. Because if your ego's engaged and somebody steps on your foot, somebody's disrespectful, somebody doesn't return your phone call, something doesn't go according to your expectations and plan, you're instantly going to take it personally, and now you've got an uphill battle. But if you're able to frame it and see it with a wider perspective right away, you have a greater context, and you've got meaning, and then really ultimately meaning is what brings pleasure, which is why people who are very, sort of childlike and egocentric, they are always one step away from something that's going to make them happy because they never feel complete. There's no context. They're just living in the moment. And if something doesn't go according to their plan, then they assume this sort of egocentricity that the world hates me, the person doesn't like me, and so on.
Right. Wow. It's amazing. Rav Nachman speaks a lot about that. He speaks about the more light you have, generally, the more darkness is going to collapse. But the less likely a person has light in his life, then automatically the stories come. So it's it's either one is basically one is always outdoing the other. The more a person gets into what's next mode, okay, what do I need to do next? Then the stories collapse. But the more the stories increase, then obviously the more a person is less likely to put an effort because now he has an excuse and everything. And between you and me today, I mean, I think everybody's completely shocked today. And we didn't recognize before that I think the next flight you're ever going to take or the next restaurant you're going to go to, there's going to be such appreciation that you would have never done it before. How come it's in human nature that we always get so comfortable every time in life?
Right. That's a good question. So it's called the hedonistic adaptation principle. Actually, it's a book, one of my other books, Never Get Angry Again. I don't know how well you can see it here. It was an interesting story behind this. It was actually written for a general audience. It's the St. Martin's Press. They're an amazing publisher. But the story about how I got God into the book is fascinating because they originally didn't want to publish it, and a big back and forth, but maybe for another time. But there's something called the hedonistic adaptation principle. It basically says just that. We get used to all the good in our lives, and so we stop focusing on it. If you stop focusing on it, you're going to stop getting pleasure from it. When you get something new, whether it's a car, whether it's a painting, whether it's a new relationship, your focus is on it. And when your focus is on it, you can appreciate it. But as soon as your focus moves away, then you lose appreciation, which is, you've got that old saying, people don't appreciate what they've got until they lose it, which is an awful way to go through life, meaning you ignore all the good, and then until you have a chance of losing it, that's when you begin to pay attention to it. So one of the things I encourage people to do specifically during these times is to put your energies onto the good, things you're grateful for, things you appreciate, the good that you can acknowledge. And in doing so, when your focus is on the good, you're going to just get more joy out of life. There are over 235 studies that show this is true. There's not a single one that contradicts it. Focus on the good, keep a gratitude journal, a montage, a collage, something that keeps you looking at the positive, and you will bring more joy into your life and less anxiety.
Well, I mean, I would say, all Chassidut is based on, if you don't have some kind of simcha in your life, then God doesn't dwell with the person. I mean, you don't even get that kind of, that's the whole fight for simcha, and I remember the 98 curses that the Jews suffered in Parshas Kisava, I believe. It's because they did the avodah, but they didn't do it with simcha. So I think that's what Rab Nachman really teaches us, that the only way we can really have simcha is only through renewal, is just renewing yourself and putting the logic mind to bed and just going into Emunah, just jumping into Emunah without always needing answers. And, that's what really attracted me to Rab Nachman's teaching, is nothing more than renewal. Because it's human, as soon as a person starts thinking about all the things he has to do and all the things, he's automatically going to fall into a state of constriction. And then obviously once his mind's constriction, then he starts looking at life in a mochem kadnu, which is Kabbalah for bad mood.
That's right. It's so beautiful. And it's, if you look at the full psychological picture, we can so easily see that, gratitude is intimately linked with simcha. If you think of the people that are the most grateful, the most joyful, the people that lack gratitude, they're always something away from something that's going to make them happy. They walk around with a sense of expectation and entitlement, and the world should unfold according to their expectations and their ego. But when you're able to, as you just beautifully said, just accept with the tachan that this is exactly what it's supposed to be. Our avodas Hashem is just to be responsible in the moment. You move through life with not only a sense of simcha, but a sense of peace, where you don't feel anxious because you know it's not up to you. Your avoda is simply to be responsible. Everything else is up to Hashem.
Right, and that, it's funny because it's pretty shocking that, I get a lot of guys that, from Lakewood, yeshiva background, they've learned, and they're asking me for advice on Shalom Bayit. And I tell them their problem is they're way too complicated. They're just way too complicated. They're trying to find the Rashi on why she's right and the Tosfos on why she's not right. And they're just making their whole life into that. And they lost it. They lost the heart. They lost the silence and doing something for Hashem's sake, not so you could be right. And I think that's the only dangerous part, where you see where a person doesn't have emunah and he doesn't have spirituality and he only has religion, then he can really lose the whole picture. And it's pretty scary, because you could see guys that they can lose the whole picture, and yet they're learning all day, which is so shocking to me. It's such a shocking thing to me.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you see this all the time.
Yeah, I was reading actually the biography of Rev Steinman over Shabbos just yesterday, and someone came to him for Shalom Bayis advice, and he said 3 things: be mavater, be mavater, be mavater. And the guy said to Steinman, it doesn't work. Or Steinman said, why not? He goes, I've been telling that to my wife for 40 years, and she's not listening to me.
Right. Exactly. He's telling it to her, right? And it's such a, what do we do with today's generation that you have such a high divorce rate, and people they're not learning how to be in bittul. They're not learning how to just, shut their mouths and just give in. The ego needs to have an answer all the time.
Yeah.
It's so tough to see that.
Yeah. Reb Dessler said it best, I think, at someone's Sheva Brachos. He got up and he says, when expectations begin, love departs. So I encourage you.
Beautiful.
Yeah, as soon as you
Beautiful.
let go of expectations that my wife should do this, my husband must do that. It has to be this. No, says who? It'd be nice, but just changing the lush and the language when you talk to yourself transforms the reality. Because if I say my wife should XYZ and she doesn't, I'm going to find myself angry and frustrated. If I say it'd be nice if she did, but if she doesn't, it's because this is what's good for me. My job isn't to educate my wife. It's not to change her. It is to work on myself. De facto, that'd be nice then if my spouse improved as a result. I certainly know my relationship will. But our job is not to change our spouse, it's to change ourselves.
Right. You know what the problem is again, it goes back to the beginning. It goes back to what you speak so much about, is taking things personal. That if I already take it personal, then even if I'm trying to have a rational conversation on Shalom Bayit, it's impossible, because I'm making it about me. And that's what one of the biggest changes that that I've read in your books is humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking of yourself less. It's not about you all the time. Things are going to happen. It's not everything that happens to you is about you. And that's where I get people to understand, okay, you can't control the way people wake up in the morning. You can't control, what they say to you, but you can control the meaning you give to it, obviously.
So true. So true. And so many of our relationship problems, even with the people most important to us, would be resolved if we recognize that how people treat us says nothing about us, but it speaks volumes of them. When you're in a good mood, you treat other people well because you're in a good mood. You're in a less good mood, it doesn't make them unworthy. It just means you're not able to give. But a person with low self-esteem is going to invariably assume that, you're treating me this way because there's something broken, bad, or defective within me, and they begin to take it personally. And that's when the conversation goes downhill. But if I'm able to focus on your pain, your stuff, your issues, and don't make it about me, I can engage in a way that optimizes empathy and communication rather than become defensive and argumentative.
Right. I mean, this is exactly, I would say right now, people are stuck in their houses with each other. And there's a lot of, it's much tougher now because there's nowhere to run, obviously.
Yeah.
So either people are going to say Shalom Bayit or Shalom I had it. And this is really the true test of character right now. Is you can't run anywhere. I mean, this is the stuff you have to. This is where Hashem wants you. He wants you right now, next to your wife. He wants you next to your family. He doesn't want you running off the shul. He doesn't want you running off here. He wants you to do the inner work right now. And I think that's such a message that we always tell you. I have to run to this. I have to run to that. I have to run to this, and we often neglect the family members and stuff like that, you know?
Yeah, it's so true. And speaking to people in various degrees of crises, throughout this, and I encourage everyone. This is advice I give to myself, and I take it. I take my own advice on occasion, but certainly here, and that's that. Pesach will come and go. The relationship, Mitzvah Shem, will be after Pesach. So regardless of the cleaning and the cooking and what goes on, your only objective is to say, is this going to optimize my relationship or injure it? If it's going to optimize, do it. If it's going to injure it, find a workaround. Because whether this gets clean, that gets done, this gets cooked, I got news for you, it's an asterisk. The most important thing is the relationship and making sure that is as solid and healthy and as fortified as possible, because that is the avoda right now.
Right. That's the avoda right now. There's absolutely nowhere to run right now. David, tell me a little bit about your newest book called Never Get Angry Again. Phenomenal book again. I know I have a lot of Moroccan brothers on our WhatsApp group, but what's the story with Never Get Angry Again? People are like looking at Never Get Angry Again. They look at it like it's an impossibility.
Yeah.
But again, my mood determines. This is another line you use. Your mood is your shadow of your self-esteem, and it's. That line also is my mood is dependent on how and the way I feel about myself at the time. And I love the examples that you give that, when you're in a good mood, somebody can really cut you off one day and it wouldn't make a difference to you. But when you're not in a good mood that same day, somebody cuts you off, somehow you're running after the guy and chasing him. It's unbelievable how that is,
It is. It is really, if you break it down just as you did, it can make you understandably feel like you're behaving crazily, because you are. And so far as, when somebody does something, we look to the situation to determine how we feel. And that determination is how we feel about ourselves. So let's say you're talking to somebody let's say different. Let's say you're walking along and somebody bangs into you and you turn around sort of upset and frustrated, and you see it's somebody who's visually impaired, they're blind and they're trying to get by. Your anger just dissipates because you can see their vulnerability, their fragility. You don't take it personally. The minute you begin to make it about you, this person does this because they don't care about me, they don't respect me, they don't trust me, you are going to find yourself with an uphill battle. And even if you would assume, they're doing this because they don't trust me, or they don't like me, they respect me, still, what does that have to do with me? My self-worth doesn't hinge on whether or not somebody else is capable of loving me or respecting me. That's their limitation. It's not mine. You have somebody who's in a wheelchair that can't walk, right? The fact that they're not doing something I want them to do, that's their limitation. If somebody is mentally handicapped, emotionally disabled, why do I make that about me? If we're able to really get that, which is a Never Get Angry does, is it shows you how to separate out your feelings from the person's behavior, from the situation. You realize you don't have to walk around thinking everything's about you, because it's not.
It's funny because your books are, you take a chapter, you make it 3-4 pages. It's not like they're 30-page chapters, because the main point is that. I mean, stop making everything about you. And one of the things that I see, and obviously I own a rehab and I own a detox in Miami. At times we have hundreds of patients, thank God. And I could tell you maybe 45-50% of them, they came in there because of your relationship with their parents, that their parents gave them an opinion and they destroyed their whole life. So one of the chapters you wrote, which what a line, it's never too late to have a happy childhood.
Yeah.
And it's absolutely true.
Yeah.
Never too late to have a happy childhood. But but it's so hard, because if a person's got 20 years in that story, how do you just pop the bubble?
Wow, you're asking the bomb question, and that's just it, though. It is not too late, because our feelings today about ourselves hinge on the meaning we attach to something that happened some time ago. So if you change the meaning, then you change our feeling toward it. For example, some people, as you have experience of reading a book or watching something, and you get to the end and you realize it was sort of a twisted ending or a twist. Now you sort of recast everything through it. So I have a talk on Torah Anytime called If You Had a Rotten Childhood. And the entire lecture is a back and forth with a large audience, but taking everyone firing their shots about every sort of, by the way, it seems like 90% of the people there, it was just a random, seemingly random crowd. Something happened when they were 5 years old, you know, teacher did this or mother did this. Fascinating about what people hold on to, 5, 6, 7, 8 years old. And nothing traumatic in retrospect, but at the time, very magnificent. And what I encourage people to do, and what the book does, is it breaks down, it was, let's change the meaning. And the meaning isn't about fabricating a meaning, but if you're able to recognize that how somebody treats you has nothing to do with you, you attach the meaning, and that meaning is erroneous. It's not actual. So then you sort of recast the entirety. For example, let's say a person grew up and their mother was just downright abusive, beat them up, yelled, screamed, locked them in the closet, whatever it was. Okay. I asked the person as follows: let's assume that your mother, someone came to her and they from some organization had a gun to her head and said, if you don't treat your child this way, I'm going to make a really crazy example. I'm going to go ahead and poison you and your family and everyone and all whatever it is. You have to do this. With tears streaming down her eyes, every day she had to go ahead and do this. Otherwise, there'd be worse ramifications for the child and for everyone else. We think, okay, well, I can guess, you know, mom had to go ahead and do that. But she did in this case. And then once again, you say, so how do you know that? Just because there the threat was external, what reasonable person would do this to a child? So then you begin to sort of dilute that line between external force and internal. Let's assume the person had voices telling them, okay, fine, but my mother wasn't schizophrenic. She didn't hear voices. Well, then what reasonable person would go ahead and do this? And you begin to see that the person's behavior had nothing to do with you. They were sort of like a stream of dominoes. They got knocked into and they knocked into you. But when you're able to see that, right, I wasn't treated this way because of me, it was because of her or their stuff or his stuff, whatever it is, you become emotionally free. And it's something that can unlock and release the burden of decades.
But you know what the problem is you see a lot of from couples, they're going into marriages with this weight.
Yeah.
I mean, people are going into, and one thing about me is Hashem has given me the ability to I can feel energy, and I don't see the relief of energy. I don't see the simcha. I don't see the, even before the coronavirus, it doesn't, before half the coronavirus, people are always going to find something to be bothered about. And it's all this, Rab Nachman teaches us to do his bodedut, and basically wake up every morning and unload the trash in your life. Get rid of all the, get rid of all the resentment, get rid of all the, all the people that, and find good points in them. Try to, Zamra, which is one of his famous teachings, is find the good points in people. And it's going to be specifically hard, but the more you do it, the more God does it for you. So now you're doing it for yourself. And when you look at it like that, I'm forgiving that guy because I need the mercy. It's not even about him. Then you really, really go into a different scale of energy in life, because you stop yelling at the messenger and focus on the message. And to get that message, people could be so freed and they could be so alive, but yet they're yelling at the messenger all the time.
Yeah. And I also find that the nicer you are to other people, and the more you focus on the good, the more you do that with yourself. And, we don't realize just how meanly we talk to ourselves. If you listen to that inner voice, it's whether you had that extra donut or, you messed up on a business deal, or, you didn't do something or come through the way you want, rather than say, gee, you know what? Okay, you're a human being, and talk with yourself with compassion. We scream at ourselves. That inner voice is loud, it's demeaning, it's cruel. When you're even able to focus on the good with yourself and talk to yourself with self-compassion, it can transform your own relationship with yourself as well.
David, how did you get into the field of NLP? And I know I read your stuff on that. You even I believe the FBI, or they hired you to know how to spot a liar.
Yeah. So going back,
how'd you get into that?
Yeah, so probably about 1997, 98, I wrote a book called Never Be Lied to Again. And it was interesting. Before that, I contacted the CIA and the FBI and NSA and a lot of organizations said, hey, I've got these techniques. I'm telling you, these are really good. And it was pretty much just, thanks, but no thanks. I'm sure I was putting some sort of database to keep an eye on. And then I came out with the book. And it was the first book of its kind written for lay people on how to detect deception. And this was, I think, 1998. And then I get a phone call, and it was from a sweetheart of a guy. I'm not going to mention his name, but he's a great guy. He was the director of the behavioral science unit at the FBI, the profilers. And he said, Dr. Lieberman, we saw you on a show, and we read through your book, and we'd like you to come down and do some training for us. I happen to be like knee deep in some other work, and I wasn't thinking clearly. And I look back, I'm glad that he didn't let me go with you know what, I'm just working on some other things now. I said, I really can't do this right now. And then he says to me, Mom, she goes like this. He goes, Dr. Lieberman, your country needs you. And it was over the phone. And I said, what, you guys really say that? And he's
Wow.
like, yeah, well, you know what? We really need you. I think the country would have done just fine without me. Nonetheless, I went down. That began a beginning of a very amazing relationship with the FBI and the NSA, and developing a series of techniques and strategies and lie detection. Because whether you're talking about finding out if somebody is guilty of a crime, or you're talking about, or you want to sort of influence somebody to flip and become an informant, or you want to see, to profile somebody, or you want to work on your self-esteem, your relationships, whatever it is, it's all under the same umbrella of human nature. And it's just sort of a matter of pivoting in different directions.
Yeah, I've read the books. I've used them, believe it or not. So again, I love them. Another book you wrote on relationships. I believe Mastering Relationships. What was the name of that one?
Yeah, so I wrote one called Seek Peace and Pursue It, which is a book.
Beautiful. Seek Peace and Pursue It.
Yeah, and that was sort of built on the chassis of a mainstream book called Make Peace with Anyone. And I've written, I think relationships, if you look at people and their emotional health, their relationships with other people are quite interwoven. So one of the best ways, and also, as you know, it's part of the 12 steps, but in order to break free a lot of our stuff, you got to do your best, not only to make peace with other people, but to recognize their stuff doesn't have to be your stuff. When you free yourself of that, you can become so much healthier and infuse yourself with a greater sense of self-esteem, because you don't have to walk around feeling less because somebody doesn't treat you well.
But the good thing about your books is you literally write out 7 steps. Do this, then do this, then do this. People need that. They need people. You can't just write a paragraph. No, first you do this, then you do this. And I think that's what people today, I would say they're too vague. That's what a lot of my classes, okay, this is what you do now. What's the call that you need to do now? And it all comes to that. I mean, honestly, if you the more knowledge you have, the less you're going to suffer, because you're going to know what to do. And I've definitely used it with coworkers. I've used it with how to influence people, even how to get people that are very difficult. And I remember what you had in one of your books is get them to do you a favor. Yeah, the relationships just completely change when you tell somebody who's very difficult, you're dealing with therapy, and you ask them, do me a favor, and all of a sudden that person can go from the most stubborn person to all of a sudden your best friend.
Yeah.
And it's such small details. It's just, and again, it's all about cutting the pattern. Not just getting in that pattern and oh my God, here they are again. What am I going to do? Just cutting the pattern.
Yeah.
Cut the pattern. And this is, it's funny because a lot of your stuff, Tony Robbins uses a lot of this language. I think he uses NLP too.
Yeah, sure.
He uses neuro, but you basically take it more in depth, which I've seen in with more step-by-step strategy. So again, for the crowd, one of the great, if you're dealing with Shalom Bayit, what's the name of the book, Rabbi? What's the name of the book, David?
Never Get Angry Again. That one?
No, the one on Shalom Bayit, Mastering Relationships.
Oh, Seek Peace and Pursue It. Seek
Peace and Pursue Peace. That's a phenomenal book on dealing with in-laws. Not that anybody has any in-law issues, right? That's a phenomenal book. Another book is Never Get Angry Again, which speaks about, again, 25 strategies from, dealing with, stuff that you had in your childhood to your self-esteem, etc. Then there's this book, which is, again, one of my favorites. It's called Free Will Works, which I, again, strongly recommended. I think that's where is that the book where you have real power, but more of a Jewish version, more of a Torah version, correct?
Right. So real power is
Never Get Angry Again is that one, right?
Say it again, please. I'm sorry.
Never Get Angry Again is Free Will Works, but in a secular version.
Oh, I never thought about it like that, but I suppose it's probably the most similar to those books. Yeah.
And then you have some on business also, correct, David?
Yeah, I've got a book called Executive Power through Wiley on business, and also the book Real Power. You can get for free. People listening, if you text the word
Executive
Torah.
Power.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Well, you're the
I
guy.
got that one. I'm the one about it, right?
Yeah.
And I think, David, this is one you're referring to.
Yeah.
Real Power.
That's right. You can get a free ebook instantly if you text the word Torah to the short code 313131. The word Torah, and you'll get a PDF of that, which is for free.
Beautiful. We want to just try to take some questions from the audience. If we have any questions from the audience. Okay, let's see. Ariel, any questions?
Yeah, we have a question from Rob on Zoom. How do you get over anticipatory anxiety if you had it all your life?
Wow. Okay. So anticipatory anxiety is it's a form of generalized anxiety. Anxiety when you're worried about something that's going to happen or something that's going to be, and clearly this is an opportunity for in-depth one-on-one therapy. But we'll paint with a broad brush and say that basically is our emotional state comes from the thoughts, right? We don't simply feel a certain way, generally speaking, without thinking something. And our thoughts are based on our focus. So if you're focusing on something, you'll be thinking something, you'll be feeling something. The emotional state of anxiety, what people try and do is they say, okay, fine, I'm not going to feel anxious. I'm not going to feel worried. And it doesn't work because that part of the brain, the amygdala, the reptilian part is self-enclosed. There's no logic. The last time someone said you just calm down, relax, don't worry, no one ever said, oh, okay, fine, I feel better. There's no talking to that part of the brain when you're in that state. There's something called cognitive behavioral therapy, or an REBT, rational motive behavioral therapy, different types of therapies where when a person is in a more relaxed state, you can communicate. But in that heightened state of anxiety, if you want to change your emotional state, you need to change your thoughts. To change your thoughts, you've got to shift your focus. So then, practically speaking, put your mind on something that is productive, something that you can control. The quickest way to make yourself neurotic is to focus on those things in your life that you have no control over. You will go crazy, anyone would. Put your attention onto that which you can control. From a health standpoint, if you're worried about the virus, go ahead and do things to improve your immune system. Vitamin D, vitamin C, zinc. There are plenty of things to do. From a spiritual standpoint, daven, say Tehillim, do the things that the Gedolim suggest. There are plenty of things we can do in our lives that we have full control over. When you do what you can do and do your shtalis, that's when you have the toughen. But you cannot reasonably assume that you're going to be anxiety-free sitting in your chair just hoping to think different thoughts. You have to do something else, and then you're going to think differently, then feel differently.
Mm-hmm.
And we got another question from someone on YouTube. Many people are alone during this Passover because of the virus. What is a healthy way to deal with the emotion of being alone during the Chag? And what advice can you give them?
Beautiful. So first I'd say it stinks. Recognize, you're a human being and you're in a tough situation, as many of us are. It stinks. It's okay. To deny the reality is not healthy. To say, oh, it's fine, and you'll have well-meaning, well-intentioned people telling you, oh, you'll enjoy the solitude, whatever. Very nice. Let them do it. It's hard. It's perfectly legitimate to say this is something that's difficult. Allow yourself that self-compassion and then ask yourself, now what? Okay, what can I do, practically speaking, that can enhance it, that can optimize it, that can make it better? Begin to ask yourself the right questions. What can you learn from it? What can you do? What can you control that can enhance the quality of your Seder in this time? And that's when you're going to see that your mood shifts, because you're not in that helpless, passive state, but you're in a proactive, take charge mode. And that's when you're going to feel yourself much more impassioned and much less anxious.
All right. We just got a question that's anonymous from Zoom. I personally have dealt with personal struggles that affect my brain, and I was never diagnosed until a few years ago. My condition affects my ability to focus. My parents are very loving, but very tough on me at the same time. At the end of the day, they don't understand that sometimes I can't focus. I try to do the best that I can, overcome the challenge, and not let it bring me down. I'm very hard on myself. I never want my changes to become me, but I'm learning that I can only change the parts of myself that I can change. I would never want my parents to be easygoing on me, but at the same time, I need their empathy and understanding that this condition does not affect every aspect of my life. I don't want them to be easygoing on me. I appreciate their toughness. I need their understanding more. I'm not sure how I can get it without them becoming overbearing at this, because that's not what I'm looking for.
Wow. So first, thank you for the question. I'm saying to this person, the other previous people, to everyone listening, our heart goes out to you. That said, first off, is education is important with people around us. I do think it's important. If I don't know how old this person is, but to really help your parents, the people around you, to understand what it is you're suffering with, because if you don't have it, whatever it is, it's very hard to know what it's like. You tell them, why don't you just get up in the morning, go do this, do that. And when a person is suffering, whether it's with significant ADHD or with depression, there's, if you don't understand it, then you just don't get it. So I do think it's important, when you say, they need to understand, it'd be nice if they did, but after education, if they don't, I would encourage you to accept their limitation as their limitation and not something that you need. Because if you feel that you need their understanding in order to move forward and they're incapable of it, then you're going to find yourself on a treadmill, just locked in the same pattern. So I would first reframe it and say it'd be nice if they understood, but if they don't need it, then clearly Hashem doesn't feel that it's necessary. It's disappointing, it's sad, it's painful, but it is. So again, after proper education, if they're not giving you what you need, recognize it's their limitation. They're wearing glasses that distort the ability to see what's going on clearly. I do think support and being surrounded by people that do understand what it is you're suffering with would be very helpful. And as you said, you're hard on yourself. It's without knowing what the pathology is, it's hard to best guide you. But I would say that when the people around us don't understand what we're suffering with, it's important to educate, and whatever degree they fall short, call it a day. But I would stop trying to get someone to understand your limitations, because all your time, energy, and effort and heartache will go into that rather than moving yourself forward.
I mean, and you could see, David, this is exactly why people have AlAnon meetings, where not only the family has to deal with changing their approach to the addict. I mean, it's not just about the addict, it's about the whole family and their approach,
That's right. That's right. That's right. And every type of addiction, if you can bring the family in.
For everybody.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Much easier. Much easier. But where the family falls short, again, you can either insist that they get something that they're not going to, or you can accept their limitations, and they are limited. Just because they're not suffering with your specific illness doesn't mean they don't have their own.
I think David, I think you really you hit that in a chapter on how to deal with a difficult teenager, and you spoke about the 6 steps, and you brought it to the Turkey Prince, so the story about Rabbi Nachman and the Turkey Prince.
Yeah,
and how you have to go. It's a step-by-step thing. It's a step-by-step. It's not overnight. It's a step-by-step thing.
You do have to go step by step, and I got to tell you, I mentioned before, I think I have a couple, I don't know, 100 talks on Tony Time. I have one on that, but I saw your talk on it when you brought it down, and it was a lot better than mine, and just so you know.
I have Robert Nachman in my bones. It's part of my DNA. It's
you
totally
do,
different.
but I watched it. I'm like, wow, you got game. This is good. You really broke it down nicely. I went through it in probably about 7 minutes, and you went through the steps, and you extrapolated from it. And I took notes on your talk on my book.
Right. Unbelievable. And this is all we do all the time, try to pick people up, But again, I would recommend the people asking the questions, buy the books, because it's not enough just to listen to a class. It has to really come into you. The dot really has to come down into your heart. Otherwise it becomes in the head. In order that I was able to understand your teachings, it took hours and hours of reading until that idea really becomes developed into the person.
It does. And I just say, over Pesach, this is the opportunity, particularly.
Yeah,
we're talking about anger and the ego. This is a time, every Yontif and every day really has its own spiritual energy, and be able to capitalize. This is the energy to get rid of the ego, the Yetzer Hara, the chametz, and we can find ourselves taking leaps ahead in our spiritual growth simply by making that the avoda. And I'll tell you, even though I wrote the book on anger, it is something that I have made. I will share with you one of my number one my priority. I'll say that from a growth standpoint, because having written the book and working with so many people on it, you see just how destructive it can be with ourselves and our relationships. And I can think of fewer, like the Rambam says, every midah in moderation, except for anger and arrogance, which you want to eradicate completely. And if you're able to approach that, you just live a different quality life.
Yeah, 100%. And it's so true. You live a whole different life when a person's able to control his anger. And again, and he doesn't lose his soul either. That's another thing that dealing with that also.
Yeah. No,
you get. What's the next question?
Okay, this is from Batya from YouTube. How do you share your ideas without sounding supercilious or like you're implying the person has a problem? Also, not everyone appreciates a hard-hitting approach, even these days.
Very good. So look, this comes up a lot. I actually just gave a talk on how to give advice to therapists and to Rebbeim. And there's a saying in sales that people don't care what you know until they know that you care. So you can have the best message in the world and the best solution in the world, but until you're able to, and actually also I mentioned on Tarny Time, I've a large number of talks on empathy and validation, because it goes to the key of being able to communicate an idea. If someone came to you with a problem and they really felt that you understood it and you took the time to empathize and validate. Validation doesn't mean that you agree. Validation means I understand based on your perspective why you're in pain. And that's necessary for every relationship. So whether it's a spouse, a child, a friend, coworker, they come to us and you instantly either dismiss them and invalidate them, or you jump to a solution, you haven't done anything for the relationship. But when you're able to establish that relationship, then you can give over any advice, because a person knows that you care, that their pain is your pain. And when you have that connection, that's when you can help move people. But if they don't understand that you really get it, they're not going to hear it.
So true. So it's so funny. I see the exact same thing when we're dealing with therapists. How come one therapist is having much more success than the other one? It's because you do sometimes have these psychologists and they're doing it on two textbooks, but they're not showing the client that they care. And I see a tremendous, even though they could be very talented, but if they don't see that they don't care, the ear goes out the window.
On that point,
so exact on the money.
Yeah, a fascinating study that showed that more important than the discipline the therapist practices, whatever it is, whether it's psychoanalysis or DBT or REBT, whatever initial they use, more important in the patient or client's therapeutic process is the rapport, the relationship that they have. So if you have a therapist who you don't like, trust, or respect, doesn't matter how many Harvard degrees they have, it's not going to work. They may not be the right shliach, the right messenger for you, or maybe they just lack those interpersonal skills. Whatever it is, if you don't connect and you don't feel like they understand you and you don't like them or respect them, it's time to reconsider.
I saw that 1,000. I see that 1,000 times, literally live in my practice, in my business.
Sure.
Okay, the next question is from Mike from Zoom. My entire life, money has always affected my mood, 100%. When there is good money in my bank, I'm mentally okay. When it's tight, I'm borderline depressed.
Right. So I wish we had the opportunity to engage, but I would say growing up is that this person, there was something going on with money. He either grew up probably either poor, or his parents were very strict with money. That I will say with fair surety was the case. Money is the illusion of power, control, and respect, right? People have money. It makes them feel like they're in charge. So one of the reasons why giving tzedakah is something that changes our mazal is because you're giving away that instrument of money, power, control, and infusing yourself with a sense of humility, recognizing that you don't control the world. Because money gives you the illusion of control, you then feel more empowered, you feel better, and you feel like things are okay. When you lose that, you become anxious, and then you become depressed, as you aptly say. So I would, in this case, I mean, first, it would be good for you to recognize where that corrupted thinking comes from. You know, wanting, being always behind in your bills and not having money to come in is a fair enough stress for anyone. But if it's always going to follow this, peak and valley, I would encourage you to recognize where it comes from. And I'll say it invariably comes from childhood, where there's a distorted perception about money and what it means. And when you're able to get that connection, you release that sort of emotional charge. And the other thing is to work on, as Gedale would probably note, your Emunah and B'tachon, and recognize that money doesn't put anyone in charge of anything. It gives you the illusion of control, but it doesn't do anything. Hashem can give you $1 million and take it away the next day. And it is something that we need, and we have to be responsible and use our shtadlis. But outside of that, you will find that you'll have a much greater sense of calm if you're able to recognize that the money doesn't mean anything other than it's your shtadlis to get it and then to spend it wisely. But whether it comes or goes and how it comes or goes is not in your control.
Okay. It's one thing that we speak about a lot with money. What happens after people, what they do when they lack money? Or they start getting into, like Kabbalah says, mochem kadnuks, and they get into, God forbid, immorality, and they get into drugs, and they get into other things, and then the problem becomes another problem. So sometimes in my business, I've been through a lot of like any human being, through a lot of ups and downs, and really it's what I did when those times are rough. Did you still show up to davening? Did you still give charity? And that's what really built the kalim for the new high. And that's what we're trying to get people to understand. This is right now you're in a contraction. You're getting tested every day. What you're doing now. This is the time to go against your own logic and give more charity. Go help more people out. This is what I think. This is the message. In this time.
That's beautiful. Beautiful. Yeah, it's easy to have B'tachon when you've got a full bank account, but you can't work for it. That's beautiful, Gedale.
Exactly.
So multiple people are asking for you to repeat the number that they should text to get the PDF, David.
Right. So it's 313131, and you type in the word Torah, and you should get a direct link right to it.
Okay. And multiple people are asking, where's the best place to go get and study NLP training?
It's a good question. So my training was probably 20 some odd years ago. So I don't know where they are today. So I'm sorry. I don't know what the latest is on that.
But David, your books have tons of stuff on it, don't they? I mean, I've seen NLP stuff, and I haven't seen anything new that your books have not spoken about. Am I off on this or no?
No, I do bring some in. There's, NLP was developed, as you know, I think back in the late 70s, early 80s by Grinder and Candler, a linguist and a psychologist. And there are a lot of offshoots. It was built on Ericksonian hypnosis, and it was built on a number of other sort of linguistic foundations, which I've since gone back to sort of the foundation of it. So I haven't specifically gone to that in order, for my sources. I've gone, where they sort of culminated it from. So I don't know where the latest is for that.
Got it.
Okay. The next is
I think Holly Noble wrote, one of the callers, she said that University of Miami has a great program on that, on NLP. I think she just mentioned that.
Correct. Next question.
Go ahead. Yes.
Yeah. This is from someone on Zoom. I'm freaking out that my business won't survive this pandemic, and I'm worried I'm going to lose everything. I daven, do hit, build a dude, breathe, work, talk to Hashem, I have this feeling in my chest that makes me feel like I can't breathe. I don't know, I'm not in control, but I feel like I can't breathe or sleep well.
I don't know. I don't know what to say. It is something that most people I speak to, this is one of the dominant themes. I can just tell you what I've told them, but I'm not so wise as the foolish as to think I could tell you something that would instantly put you at ease. But most people are in this same boat. And I do believe that, that the government and, from a derech hateva, from a real world place, is going to do everything they can to help get people back on solid footing. It's easy to tell somebody else to have bitachon, but I do think that, as Gedale so beautifully said, this is the opportunity to reinforce it. But I can say again, just from a on the ground perspective, many people are in the same position, and I do think that you're going to find things are much better than we expect when we come through the storm, because it's not one industry, it's not one country, it's everybody everywhere.
The whole world, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Another question from Zoom. What do you recommend doing if you know someone who's expressing a lot of anger due to stress related to COVID-19?
Look, people deal with anger, as the book lays out, in a number of different ways. Some people aggressively, other people suppress it, other people passive. And so I'll assume that this person is acting out in a very aggressive way. It's no picnic. It's understandable, because anger is built on a foundation of fear. We get scared, and the reason we get, and then with that fear, we become angry. Anger is the illusion of control. Physiologically, when a person becomes angry, there's a number of hormones and neurotransmitters that release, adrenaline, cortisol, and you feel more empowered. That's why we want to hold on to the anger, because it makes us feel less vulnerable from a physiological standpoint. So much the same way that if you're threatened with a physical danger, you see a bear in the woods, or you believe your parnassus is at stake, you're going to feel that fear. And then anger is a natural response. When it comes to emotional fears, outside the fear of Hashem, it's all corrupted fears. We assume that we are in danger, but we're not. And it's the Yetzer Hara, the ego, that makes us feel that we're in danger. So when you're dealing with someone who's angry, depending on the relationship, depending on a lot of things, the ideal thing to do really is to never tell the person, Chazal, to never tell the person to calm down, relax, don't worry. That's in one out the other. What you can do is make sure that this person knows that you are empathizing, you're validating. You never want to make them feel like, you never want to minimize, don't worry about, forget about, what are you making a big deal? That does nothing for the angry person. You want to establish that connection, let them know that you feel their pain, you understand their pain. And then once you have that connection, do what you can to help to, calm the person down. And ultimately, the goal is to have them focus their energies on something that they can control, something that's positive, that when this storm passes, they're going to be in better shape in some way, emotional, spiritual, physical, financial, whatever it is. They'll be 20 pounds lighter. They'll have worked on their anger. They will have improved the relationship. They will have done something that will make them better off. And when the focus is on that, it naturally will move away from the negativity.
I think our Creator is putting up with enough leverage right now you have to work on yourself. Otherwise, you're going to be miserable. I mean, our Creator is giving us enough leverage right now. Listen, you tell a guy who has diabetes, oh, by the way, stop eating sugar. It's not good for you. Probably not going to listen to you. But if you tell him, listen, I'm going to chop off your arm, I think things change. And I think, situations right now are that desperate that the person has to connect to something higher. Otherwise, he's going to go completely mishuga. I mean, I don't think there's another option here.
No, I agree.
If you don't connect to something higher, you're going to go out of your mind.
I agree entirely.
There's no other option here.
Yeah,
there's no other option here.
Yeah, true. You got to get outside of yourself, outside of your stuff, and this is a message not just for the world, but for all Klal, but for each person. Hashem gave us this opportunity to do something. Find that answer and work on that, and you will move through this experience in a way that will build a muscle that will make you stronger for the next 120.
David, I could say, I could think about my 250 employees, where we're going to get, how much we're going to make this quarter, or I could do this video with you. So the more I think about myself, the more miserable I'm going to be. So my problems have not gone away, but the fact that I'm not thinking about them, I'm trying to help people. And I think that's what gives me consolation. Just get out of yourself. Stop thinking about yourself. Help out as many people as you can. And that's helped me tremendously during this time, just to get out of myself and what's going to be with this business, what's going to be with that business. It gave me tremendous relief. I'm trying to do double what I can right now to help people.
Wow, you're extraordinary. Wow.
As my own coping, in order for me to stay sane. Because if I start thinking about all the things, forget it.
Yeah, a lot of people know that, and they say, yeah, but. You don't say, yeah, but. You know it, and then you do it.
What's the next question? We'll have a couple more, and then we'll let David go. I don't know how David's time today.
Okay, so this is from Zoom. I understand that the way a person treats you says more about them than who you really are. What if everyone you know treats you the same way with no respect, and they put you down for everything you do?
Wow, that is a thinking person question. So first off, like this, you got to take a step back and ask yourself, is if you're seeing through a proper lens. In other words, if you view yourself a certain way, we know in the Parsha, in the Torah, when the spies came back and they said, we were like grasshoppers in their eyes, and then before she explained that, that's how they viewed themselves, so that's how they presumed that they were seen. If you believe that, you're not worthy, you don't have respect, you're not a good person, there's something wrong, broken, defective about you, you're walking around filled with toxic shame because that's childhood stuff, whatever it is, you're going to distort the interactions. Even the most benign, gracious one, you may see through a distorted lens. So first, I would politely suggest that it's possible, even though you're saying everyone treats you this way, they may not be. That may be your assumption. So that's one. Two is, so again, revisit your assumption. Two is the ability to look in the mirror and ask yourself honestly, what am I doing in this situation that may be causing their reaction? If people, you find people constantly telling you, you know what, you're very arrogant, or you're a turnoff, or you're not this and that, maybe it is time to sort of look in the mirror and ask yourself, what is it that I'm doing in these relationships that are injuring them? So having an honest conversation without you ego involved, without defending yourself and so on, is very important. If everyone around is, pounding the same message. And then finally and thirdly, assuming that you've gotten rid of, mental distortions, and you assume that how you're seeing things is accurate, and you assume that everyone is saying the same thing, and you assume it's not true, it's time to get new friends.
Good answer.
Okay, next question is from Ellie from YouTube. How do we deal with teenagers who are finding the quarantine very hard, especially with their friends aren't keeping in properly? Thank you for your good work, both Gedale and Dr. Lieberman.
Thank you. Yeah, look, teenagers are a beast unto themselves, and how children deal with this, what it's like if when you fly and you go through turbulence, and then you see the flight attendant is just going about their business, pouring drinks, you feel much better. But if they're nervous and you see them sort of getting into their seats and buckling up, you get a little more nervous. So from a stress perspective, it's very important for your children are going to feed off of you. It is very important to sort of make sure that your emunah and bitachon is as strengthened, and you display as much trust as you can, because that energy, practically and intangibly speaking, they're going to feed off of. And the second thing is, yes, recognize, you don't want to minimize it. It is hard. Teenagers, they can be social beings, and they do want to connect, and it can be harder. And look for ways to try to accomplish that, whether it's, some sort of teleconference. I know, if the kids are learning or they're doing something that, the Zoom or some way that allows them to stay connected is good. And then finally and thirdly, it is an opportunity to work on, not to say that you don't empathize and validate with the situation, but to work on those pockets, those areas, those relationships that maybe do need strengthening. And I tell you this, if you want your kids, particularly teenagers, around, I would encourage you to be as positive as possible. No teenager is going to come out of their room if every time they do, they have another drawer to clean out, another refrigerator to move, and another critique about why they're not doing something. If every time they see you, it's like, good, let's go eat something, or let's go do this or that, and it's positive, you're going to find they're going to come out of the room a lot more. Not to say they don't have chores and responsibilities and obligations, but it is good to be mindful that your positivity and your ability to be the simcha, which is the most important thing in terms of chinuch in the home, is what's going to allow for you to optimize the relationship with your child and their ability to manage the stress during the virus.
Very nice. There's coronavirus and there's teenagers, right? They both give you high amounts of stress.
Okay, the next question is from Ben from Zoom. My 8-year-old son tells me he's scared of the virus, and when I tell him they find a cure, if I tell him Hashem taking care of us, he says that Hashem makes people pass away also. He won't let me kiss him. My dad is 68, who is coming over for Pesach. We have both been quarantined for 14 days, but my son is so anxious about it. Thanks so much for this talk. It's been amazing. Always listening to both of you.
Thank you. So you're not going to like this answer. First off, look, you're not you. It's when an 8-year-old is anxious, it's possible that someone's been talking about 62-year-old Zadie coming over and you're worried about him, and he hears you on the phone, he hears you talking, he hears your conversation with your spouse, he hears you saying, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. There's no way that he would be anxious, any child would be anxious without access to the news, which they shouldn't have, unless they are hearing the conversations from their parents. So you have to be aware that what you say is so important. I'll tell you, and it's not about an 8-year-old or 18-year-old. Some kids are simply more sensitive to it. Some personalities that are like, wow, this is exciting. It's like, we'll go on the porch for a Holomoy trip. They'll make it. It's okay. Others, they're much more sensitive to it. And it's important to recognize those sensitivities. And if you don't inculcate them with this idea of doom and dread, they're not going to feel it. So I would encourage you to look, everyone does it. This was something that caught most everyone flat-footed by surprise. And it took a lot to sort of readjust and to pivot. But moving forward, I think it is very important for him to see you b'simcha. And forget about the cure. If he sees a smile in your face, he'll know things are okay.
Right. Beautiful. Very nice.
Okay. The next question is from Ellie. You want to say something, Gedale?
No. We'll continue, please.
Yeah, it's from Ellie from YouTube. What can I do to strengthen my prayers when my thoughts of anger keep attacking me extra hard during those times?
Gedale?
What can you do to strengthen your prayers? Listen, right now, I think that what I do is I begin with a mantra of recognizing that I don't know anything. So that gets rid of the anger. Because it's only when I think I know something is why I'm angry. So what I would recommend is definitely, talk to, Rabbi Nachman speaks about talking to God about your anxiety. Tell him you're angry right now. Tell him you don't understand. At least get it off your chest. So you'll feel like some kind of relief. And then you could revisit that prayer, 5 minutes later. But the main thing is to break the pattern of anger by, having me to put on music before or talk to God like you're letting it out. But don't go into a prayer with that way, I would say. That's what I would do. I never go into a prayer in a bad mood. I change my state. I change the way I feel about myself. And then I recognize, like I always say, I don't know anything. This is probably a blessing in disguise, but because of my limited mindset, I can't see it. Help me see that, Creator of the world. Help me see that this is a blessing in disguise. It's just because of my limited mindset, I can't see it right now. I think that's the approach that I would personally use.
Beautiful. Yeah, infuse yourself with as much humility as you can, because the anger is built on a foundation of arrogance and humility, recognizing that we don't have the answers, we don't know. And you think about the things that you thought were going to be good, turned out not to be, thought your things were going to be bad, turned out to be great. And you realize that, we just don't know. And it's okay not to know. The ego wants to predict and control, but it's only the ego that wants to do that. When we have the talk, we recognize this is Hashem's show, and you focus on the positive and things that you're grateful for. To put your focus on things that you appreciate. We have an opportunity to focus on our gratitude upwards of 100 times a day. You wake up in the morning, we say, thank you, Hashem, for all back to my body. Right. Frame our day with gratitude. before you bite into that apple, before you smell that flower, or say the bracha after you walk out of the restroom, take a few moments just to really immerse yourself in the gratitude. And then certainly when you go into davening, even just in that short space, focus on something positive, and you'll have a different quality prayer.
Yeah. Again, it's so funny how you said, David, the ego always wants to predict. It's amazing. The ego's always predicting, saying this is good. And I believe Rav Nachman speaks about it in lesson 36. He says that light comes down undifferentiated. It's up to you if you want to make a tal or lat, oneg or nega. I mean, we're the ones fashioning the vessel. So it's up to us based on how we think about ourselves and how we view the world and on how we view the situation. And and the key is when we get super overwhelmed, that's the time to go into bittul and say, I don't know. It's beautiful.
Right. Nothing is good or bad, but thinking that makes it so. That's Chazal.
Yeah, that's it. David, how many do you have? You have a couple more questions and we're good?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, 2 or 3 more questions and
Sure.
we're going to let David go. David, again, I want you to repeat all the books after the 2 questions so people can rehear them and please buy these books. They'll probably stop listening to my classes because they'll get it directly from you.
Okay. This is a question from Zoom. Do you have any tips if you're stuck spending Pesach with a family member that emotionally trigger you, which stems from childhood? How can you get through this staying emotionally stable and somewhat at peace?
There's vodka. Kidding. You know what? It's. I always tell people, don't judge your growth by how you are around your family members, because it's so easy to get snapped back into those old patterns where you think you're working yourself and you've been doing all this growth. You go back and suddenly your sister says something, your mother says something, and there you are like you're 12 years old again. So recognize, family are going to push our buttons like nobody else. Know that going into it. Also recognize that, you're not the same person that you were. They may see you as the same person, but you're not. And a very good thing is to enter that, sort of dynamic, that suda, that meal, that interaction, with as much clarity about who you are as possible. And don't allow for them to press those old buttons and to sort of trigger that old stuff. Their stuff is their stuff, and you can own your stuff.
Right.
And it would be good to remind yourself that you are not who you were growing up, because again, there's no one like family to push those buttons and to bring out those aspects of ourselves, that we tried very hard to work on, and that only they can sort of bring out.
All right.
Okay, the next question is from Zoom. How much ishtadlut is just too much ishtadlut? Sometimes I feel like it doesn't matter how I take it on, it's still not enough compared to the amount of people that need prayers and help.
So that's a great question. Look, in order to have bitachon, you need hashtadlus. Hashtadlus means doing proper effort, and that is a very good question that comes up a lot. What's proper hashtadlus? Do I do this much? And we don't always have clarity, which is why Chazal say in Pirkei Avos, you need to get yourself a friend, a rabbi, because even the wisest of people can't give themselves the one thing someone else can, and that's objectivity. And to speak it over with somebody, say, what is proper here? And it's too easy to make yourself crazy saying, I've got to do all this, all that, particularly if you have a obsessive or compulsive personality, to think that there's just too much to do, and then you become paralyzed and you do nothing. So it is good to sort of speak it over with somebody, get a little objectivity and say, what is proper in this case to help with others, to help with myself, and to find that balance. Hashem wants you to be normal. And so if you're doing something and it's making you crazy, it's probably not the best path.
Not so much, right. Beautiful. All right, David, let's wrap up and give, please, David, all the titles of your books so we can just people can buy these.
You're great. So we have a number, and I wouldn't recommend them all. The ones I would recommend are the ones I've written, be a couple. One of my favorites is Never Get Angry Again. It's just a good book.
Sure.
It's paperback now. And
David, show it up. Show the book.
Yeah,
show the book.
Walks you through very practically how to eradicate anger. Another book which you can get for free, so you don't need to buy it. You get a free PDF. Is just text the word Torah to 313131, and you get a free copy of that. I've got over 100 plus lectures on Torah anytime. Just put my name into the search thing, hit the follow button, and you get all new lectures on Torah anytime. It's a great site. And How Free Will Works, also a nice book. It's a paperback. Also, it's a sponsored edition, so I think it's $3-4 on Amazon. If they have copies left, hopefully they do. What else?
Seek Peace and Pursue Peace.
Yeah, Seek Peace and Pursue It. It's a nice book on improving relationships and ending conflict. And there's some other business books and self-help books, but these are amongst my favorites.
David, there's someone who's is not in the States and they can't send a text message. Someone is asking permission if they could post the link on one of the chat groups. Do you give them permission to post the link so they could download it?
So sweet. Yeah, you could tell anyone in the planet they're welcome if to go ahead and to get a copy of this for free. Absolutely. Thank you.
Okay.
Gedale, you are so special.
You mute, Gedale, you're on mute.
Okay, good. Sorry about this. Somebody was calling me.
Okay. Thank you. You know what? You are. I know I said it twice, but it really. I got to say it again because I've been on. I've been on the Today Show. I've been on The View a couple times. I've even been on Howard Stern. I've done media all over the place for the past 20 years. I've done all Jewish organizations. When I talk to people, when I meet people, invariably it's no. I know you because of Gedale Fenster, and you're the one that brings not just mine, but a lot of great works to life. It's one thing to have an idea. It's another to communicate in a way that people can hear, understand, and digest. And my hat's off to you for the amazing.
Thank you so much, David. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much, David. And Hashem bless everybody that we should calm our anxieties, build our kalim, and we should get all through this. Hashem. David, thank you again. All right?
Bye-bye.